This panel will be quite interesting for those of you who are into creative. Creative in these days is really the gateway for the users who come to your game, your brand. And these guys here are masters in that field. And I think we'll get some really interesting insights from them. I'll start by introducing the folk from the left. Mark Beck, he now is the VP strategy of Murka, a leading social casino company based in Ukraine. They're also doing social casino games like Infinity Slots, Scatter Slots, and Slots Era. Mark is 10 years in the business. In the past, he was the VP of UA, data science, and what? Finance. And finance. Important topic indeed. For Aristocrat. Yeah. And Mark has experience in Australia, Vegas, all those areas in the world, and he's also a professional or a passionate gambler himself. So, yeah.
It feels like a dating show.
Yeah, it is. Well, that's your bio. Cool. Sean Ogren from Facebook, client partner for the past 6 years in the gaming industry. Sean was also based in Menlo Park and right now in Singapore. He used to manage major console gaming clients such as Blizzard, EA, and Warner Brothers, and right now he's actually helping emerging APAC business from Southeast Asia and India to grow globally, especially through mobile. Here's Saikala Sultanova, head of UA at SpaceApe Games, a strategy game based in London, award-winning in the past. Also, she worked in multiple genres like casual with Miniclip and social casino with Plumby, doing a lot of UA there. And latest addition to our panel, Nguyen, senior user acquisition manager at Rovio. He is in charge, obviously, Rovio are the makers of Angry Birds based in Finland. And he is basically in charge of digital planning, media buying, mobile attribution, and he helps a lot with the current titles of Angry Birds to grow globally. Now, to get this panel started, I'm going to share a little anecdote of my own. When I joined the industry 5 years ago, I was an aspiring copywriter, and I had a conception about creative back then to have a lot of investment around texts. So when I started the job, I actually put a lot of emphasis on the text, did a lot of A/B testing around the text area, and I found out that basically I was doing advertising for myself, as being a passionate gamer myself, but I was forgetting that I'm actually supposed to do the advertising for the audience. So this was very important when we were doing the creative work. So I want to ask all the panelists here, was there any conception in the last few years you had about creative proven to be something else than you had in mind? Mark.
Sorry, can you, a little more, can you just explain that one? Give me a little more detail.
Yeah. Basically, let's say 3 years ago you had some sort of conception around creative, and nowadays it's not exactly what you thought would be.
I think for me it was, we went into a lot of detail describing all of the different features that we felt that made our game really unique, and we kind of described it creatively too much, if you will. The user just wanted to see very quickly the game experience that they were going to receive. So we were focused on, I don't know, the world's best quest mechanic, whereas really what we should have just shown them is the quest mechanic itself. So I think that's probably the biggest learning for me.
Cool.
The biggest learning for me was probably as I transitioned from working with brand advertisers to partner with some of the biggest creative agencies in the world to build these $1 million plus trailers for console games with celebrities and athletes and all these famous people, and having this big vision and then having the team deliver an asset. You know, the biggest shift for me from a creative perspective is realizing that creative isn't about necessarily the output or building one thing. It's more about a process. So now that data is driving so many of our marketing decisions, and especially in mobile gaming, especially in user acquisition, creative never stops. It never ceases. You're never done building creative. It's a constant iterative process.
The biggest learning for me in the past, I'd say 2 years, not 3, was to learn the difference between how we build creators for a game with a big IP, Transformers Earth Wars in that case, and something that we've done before for Rival Kingdoms. When we measured something, you know, we served creators video static showing heroes, characters, and things like that for Rival Kingdoms. It didn't really work well. It's always a gameplay, simple gameplay. That's what people wanted to see. Whether for Transformers, it's different. Lots of the creatives and videos don't even look like the actual game, but people like that more. They click, they convert, they play, and then get engaged. And I think that was the biggest learning, that for different games, and especially if it's IP with a big history behind, you can do different things.
Yes, I think for me the biggest learning for the last 3 years working with the creative on the UA team is seeing that it's moving from just doing like a brand creative to more data-driven marketing. That's you focus on the creative. So I mean, at least for us, we're building like some sort of like analysis that we can actually looking like break down like not only creative A working better than creative B, but also what elements why it's working better. And then the one that we have a creative team in-house, and normally like the creative team, they like to do something polished. And the one that's normally they don't like is the one that's winning one, which is look very not very polished in a way. So the feeling in here is that the data talk to you. So you're not speaking on the subjective point of view, but let the objectives like to be more like overrule. Yeah.
Cool. On that note, one of the biggest questions the developers ask themselves when they're running their campaigns is, what is a winner? What is a good creative, basically? Sean, maybe we start with you as being representative of the platform, and from your perspective, when you see a lot of advertisers are conducting the media buying, how would you define, on your perspective, what is a winning creative?
So it really depends, right? Everyone's Facebook is different. There's no one news feed. There's no one Instagram feed. So a good creative, it really depends on who you're trying to reach. The other thing I'll say about good creative is that Facebook very much, first and foremost, is a consumer platform. All of the development, everything that eventually becomes an ad or a way to market to people, it starts with an inherent or native human interaction or connection. You know, right now we're starting to roll out ads in Messenger and figure out how do we monetize Messenger. But first, it has to be natural. It has to feel right within that context. So it's ensuring that your ad fits within the native content. What makes a good creative? Like I said, it depends on the person. I think good creative, it tells a story. It has a purpose and a vision for why you're showing it to that individual person. And it's visually appealing. And we can talk more later about different formats and different breakdowns and different nuances by country and genre. But you know, a long way to say good creative really depends on who you're reaching, what platform you're using, and your ability to measure the results.
I think we found specifically on Facebook, a handful of creatives would drive the vast majority of your volume, unlike other sources of traffic. So it was actually like you would look at these high-level stats on creative, and it became pretty obvious because there was one or two that was holding the majority of your volume. I think the important thing is that once you've found those creatives that work, is then not stopping, having this process to improve and iterate on that successful concept, I think is important. But for us, it was usually pretty obvious. One or two images was holding the majority of the volume.
And just before Saikala in a bit, you're promoting a lot of cross networks as well. So if you have learnings from, let's say, Facebook, do you cross that learning to other networks? And if so, is it working?
So that's a very interesting question, and we normally have that discussion within the team. So from my personal experience with the running multiple game in Rovio, no. So the one that's working on Facebook normally doesn't work on the video networks for a reason. So just to give an example, we have been promoting one of the bubble shooter game, which is very like tutorial style. It's with the finger moving around. It's working extremely well in one of our few display networks, but when we put it on Facebook, it's the worst performing one. So like I say, the data speak for itself, but that's the experience that I have. And sometimes like some of the creative on Facebook is taking all of the impression and spam, and within the other network is normally being like evenly distributed. So that's also one of the factors here to say.
I found like for Facebook, let's say Rainbows is working on Facebook. That same concept will work on advertising networks, but not in a different format. So, you know, Facebook, you're scrolling through, you maybe have a second or two to capture their attention, so you need to get straight to the point. Video ad network, you're more watching a movie trailer, so you've got a little more time, you can tell a little bit of a longer story, but we found that at least the concepts that worked in Facebook would also apply elsewhere, just in a different format.
I agree with the theme, and that's one of the puzzles that we solved recently in recent months when we applied metadata to the creative names and we applied themes. So let's say if it's Transformers and the latest feature is Combiners or Beast Wars, we place Beast Wars or Combiners within the creative name. We did the same for one of our latest games, Fast Lane. If it's a launch trailer, vision, or anything like that, we did that. And what we've noticed that you can use similar creative and similar theme across platforms. The only difference, it only makes it powerful and makes it work if you build for platform. So Facebook creatives, for example, for us, they would have to be a lot shorter. So the action starts in the first 1.5 to 2 seconds. So that people stop scrolling. You put your end user hat on, and imagine if you're an end user and you're looking at the ad, when do you want them to take an action? When do you want the catch attention? So in Facebook newsfeed, obviously, you scroll all the time, and then if you don't show anything or any kind of catchy element of the creative in the first 2 seconds, you lose them, they just scroll. And with video ad networks, it's rewarded video, so hence you can show 30 seconds video and you can show more things. Yeah, and I think one of the latest things that made a big change for us recently is the portrait orientation. Yeah, very, very good, works across all Facebook, video networks and everything.
It's an interesting insight. Can you be more specific about the ways you're currently measuring your creatives, how you determine successful creative, what KPIs you're basing this on? Whatever you can share, obviously.
Yeah, sure. It's not secret. It's very simple. We apply LTV calculation to each creative that put out. Normally, in the past, when we didn't apply this metadata tagging, we would apply LTV calculation and ROI over time. For just channel country platform like everyone else and per campaign. Now what we do, we have cost data split per ad set and the creative itself, so we know how many dollars we spent on each creative. So we are able to calculate LTV, estimated projected LTV after 7 days, and we're able to see which creative works well on which target audience. And that way we can actually apply and see what works.
Smart.
Definitely.
I wish everyone did it like that.
It's not easy. It comes with a bit of work.
I would like to add a bit because I mean, for us, it's a changes as well. Like normally, we at first, like 2 years ago, we normally just look at the impression to download as a key metric for the performance of the creative. But now, when the people look more into the downstream event, which is like the same system that Saikala was displaying, that you looking at, it's actually this creative bring the meaningful purchase or events, that conversion for you. So that's something that I think is very important now, the trends that we're seeing now.
Yeah, I think also historically it's been really hard to sort of measure, understand which creative's working globally or on individual territory basis because you're running so many different campaigns, so many different target groups. Just from an analysis perspective, it is difficult, like you mentioned. Just a quick plug for Bidalgo. I saw their creative dashboard yesterday, and I was blown away. I've been involved with Facebook advertising for 6+ years, and I had never seen anything like that, being able to see all of your creative and then sort it based on whatever metric you want, either top-end metric like click-through rate or revenue, and you can sort by country, you can sort by a lot of different capabilities. So that blew me away. That was awesome.
Thanks. I didn't ask you for that even. No.
Can you talk by language? Sorry.
Oh.
Question.
Yeah.
I haven't seen your dashboard, but
You
I'm
haven't?
curious now. So you
Yeah.
did a sales pitch here. Can you tag the language as well? Because some creators are localized, right? Because we serve creators, let's say, in Japan, Korea, or mainland China, or anywhere,
Yeah.
and we usually localize our creators. Can you
On the
apply
on the
language?
image itself or on
Not
text
just
aside?
image, even captions inside the video.
We can put labels on them.
Okay. And the dynamic?
Dynamic, I'm not sure.
Like
I need to check.
automatic with macros?
We can cover this after the panel, I think, Saikala. Yeah.
And one other quick thing about language, Facebook in general is moving more towards automation, making it easier to run your ads across the world, what we call worldwide targeting, and also layering on app event optimization, which mobile gaming companies, they don't care about installs. They do, they want people in their game, but what really drives their business is revenue, right? People spending money in the game. So allowing to find and optimize towards people who come into your game, are engaged and spend money, that's sort of how we're shifting. And now that you can target across the world, you can find those people no matter where they are. And then the next step in that is more dynamic creative as well. So like dynamic language targeting, which is in early alpha, and then hopefully some sort of dynamic creative as well, just to make that process easier because it's complicated.
Cool. Mark, from you being with a finance background, do you have any measurements when back in the day at Aristocrat or even now about measuring any sort of P&L about creatives, production-wise, especially when you have in-house teams that have, eventually they have their own capacities and their own costs? Do you know any optimization around that?
Yeah, so I mean, we did similar kind of concepts in terms of we started with click-through rate, conversion rate. We then moved to those metrics by country and then by targeting, and then we moved to revenue by those same things. So we went through a kind of a similar journey in terms of optimizing your creative. We also went through a journey of tagging assets with what we thought was the relevant thing in that ad. So for us, it was the slot title, the specific slot title in the game. We would also target with the artist who drew the asset, so we could keep a track of that. But a lot of that information, when we analysed it, came back as, okay, there was one successful ad that was carrying kind of 70% of the volume. That's going to skew your results significantly. I think if you look at something like TV advertising, people think about the cost of creative versus the media that you're buying. So if you're going to spend $1 million on ads, you would invest whatever, 20–30% of that in creative, whereas we didn't really think about it like that for a while. We just thought we needed a lot of creative. And getting a successful creative, that one image that's carrying the majority of your value, is worth a huge amount to the company. So it's very difficult to put a number on what's the right number of artists. I mean, you guys have got a number of clients. Maybe I'd ask you is, how do you look at total spend versus the number of artists dedicated to that account? Yeah.
In our workflows, basically, what we're doing, we are measuring how much spend per image or video or whatever within the first 30 days. If it's even active, that's something we even check if we're not wasting resources and energy. And after that, we are actually seeing which of them have lasted for longer. Usually, it means that the partner allowed us to continue that or allowed us to scale it. So that's kind of what we see are the winners. We're labelizing it by many forms, even like a designer name sometimes to check also who is a good designer for that genre, and then we optimize accordingly.
Yeah, so we're effectively the same. And I think, again, it's Facebook, it seems like your creative fatigues quite quickly. So having like volume of creative is really, really important. You're going to spend $1 million on Facebook. Putting one ad for that is just nonsensical. You know what I mean? Yeah. So that's the first part. The second part is having that process to make sure that your artists are informed about what's working, so they can design better ads, and that kind of loop is also super important. So
actually, I can add a bit in here because we have our in-house creative team. And there's one story that we have is when the creative team come and say that they want to spend few $1,000 to making one video, and the finance doesn't like it. They was thinking, why do you have to spend few $1,000? I make the case for them that if this video is performing, I don't know, by 0.5% better in terms of impression to download, it would save us on scale up $1 million spend by, I don't know, $50,000 at least. So $5,000 that the creative team is asking is nothing comparing to how much money you would save if you have a good creative. So that's the case that we normally make with the finance team in here to actually make it work.
Great, that's all this is great advice for advertisers that are on medium to large scale. Also, we have a lot of young developers here that are taking their first steps in user acquisition and marketing. So any advice for them to get noticed in this quite aggressive app market and comes with creative?
I would go with active gameplay straight away. Just take clips from your existing game. It's going to be the cheapest and easiest to replicate. And then I would make it look as ugly as you possibly can. And generally, unfortunately, high contrast, really not visually appealing graphics, unfortunately, on these channels generally works well. So.
And big captions.
Yeah, and big call to action, probably, yeah.
I have one story with one of my friends who doing UA in one of the small studio in Helsinki. He said to me that in the beginning he doesn't have money to actually having an external support, so he basically is just screening using QuickTime.
Paint or something like that.
Yeah, that's just actually like recording his tutorial sessions, and he cut it down to 15 seconds. And then in the same time, he also A/B testing by having like another video ad network, so making the video for them. And the one that he makes looks so bad, which is like he actually using his bad Photoshop skills, making the finger moving like this, and it's spending like 60–70% of the span. So again, the dirty work pay off. So that's something that you should definitely try.
Yeah. Sean?
Yeah, I would also say it depends on the genre and how rich and deep the game is. If it's a very immersive Eastern-style RPG, then you probably want to show gameplay. If social casino, what really resonates with social casino users is the payoff, winning, getting a match and the alarm goes off and the lights go off. So showing that moment of winning works really well. There's a lot you can do with just images also. I think I pulled the numbers for spend by ad type on Facebook, and about 25% of spend globally in gaming is still on images. 70% is video, so video is definitely recommended. It's definitely the future, and Facebook is in the midst of becoming a video-first platform. So if you can create videos, do it. The advice the panel gave about sort of hacky ways to do it is great. There's also agencies and creative tech partners that can help. But yeah, I would definitely start small, start cheap, and then slowly over time invest more and more money into creative.
It's probably like kind of like a small thing, but I have a discussion with our creative team because you know that in Rovio we have some sort of opening thing when the fire starts, and it normally takes 3 seconds. And I have a long discussion with the creative team, like, hey guys, please remove it, because the Facebook account managers keep saying that the first 3 seconds or 5 seconds is the most important, and you're already wasting the opportunities by just showing like nothing but just the opening screen. So that's something that you probably consider to remove your logo if you don't really need it, and you can show it in the end.
Yeah, you have to think about the way people use Facebook and the mindset, right? If they're scrolling, there's a photo of a friend, photo of a brand they really love, and then they see an ad, and then the first part of the ad is a logo or something that doesn't catch their attention. They're just going to keep swiping. So you have, we're doing a lot of research, and this should be rolling out even more so this summer. But I think it's 1.7 seconds. People can internalize or acknowledge your brand message. So if you can hit them hard, hit them in the beginning, stop their thumb, get their attention, it's definitely recommended.
I think I could add to maybe after that, once you're done with all the quick dirty work and you have a few bucks to invest into creative, and you want to make sure that you don't waste You don't build too many creative and create lots of wastage. We've done that mistake in the past, and basically our director comes to us and says, okay, how can you asking us to hire extra artists because you need so many creatives, can you justify it? We broke our brains and we thought of different ways, but then we came up with a different idea that instead of having more artists and asking for more creatives, we actually need to figure out together creative direction. Because once you have the direction and theme, you reduce wastage by a lot, and you work on creative that is very quality, and that you don't have a lot of wastage. You will have anyway, some, but you will reduce a lot of wastage. That means you need less artists and you need less hours to do that. So it started with us building a brand book, few pages, having a concept of the game, the story behind it, what are you trying to tell your end users, and how are you going to, catch their attention across channels.
And that approach is particularly important if you want to build a longer-term brand, right? If you want, if your game has a short life cycle, you're just trying to make money right away and a quick hit, then you can be hacky, you can do things. But if you're trying to build a game that's going to last a long time, there's going to be sequels, it has the potential to be an entertainment franchise, then you want to invest in building a brand.
I assume it has to do a lot with Transformers.
Yeah, that was our learning from Transformers, actually.
With other games, it's not the same, I would assume.
I don't think so, because that's what we're kind of applying right now with Fastlane. And the churn rate of the creatives, not just on Facebook, across other channels as well, is very high. And now video being so much more important than ever before, the production of the video is expensive. It takes longer, it costs more, and so we had to figure out how can we make better creatives but less of them, and don't spend so much money and so many hours of our resources to do that. So we figured out that we don't have to have fancy, something long-term branding, but what we can do, we can put together a concept and then stick to the concept, that there are guidelines, there is a style guide, and if you stick to the concept and the brand message or game message, the promise is consistent across all channels and countries, then that should work better. And I think it's already working quite well for Fastlane. Those creatives that I showed earlier, they weren't really expensive.
We're speaking of specific examples of best and worst practices. I would love if each of you can kind of share some of your archives, stories about your experience with best creative that you've done, and also worst experience, so people here could avoid such mistakes.
Actually, I can speak on the best creative. So a lot of the time that we've been talking a lot with the video networks, so other platform that they actually like Facebook, because they are on the one that working with a lot of clients, the trend. And one time we have an advice that they say that they're seeing the trend that for the puzzle game, mastery game, that you should apply the very slow motion kind of movement of the first user experience into the game, and with like the really clear hand gestures and so on. We kind of having a doubt in the beginning, but now it's like all of our videos pretty much like that kind of style. So we didn't came up with that ourselves, to be honest, but that has been like the thing that we have been experiencing like the best we've seen so far. In terms of worst creative, I know that our creative teams probably hate me for this, because we have a creative team in-house, and one time we make like a very nice live action video with animated stuff, and I couldn't tell you how much money it would cost for us, but it turned out to be like the only time we use it is just for the launch, and then after that we couldn't even use it anymore because there's no gameplay on it. So that's kind of the thing that I would say that is the worst and best for me.
The best is probably easy to talk about, but I could give you a couple of examples that we've done worse. One of them was live action. I don't know what we were thinking. We just thought it would be fun that a few people would get together in the pub in England and play mobile games, Rebel Kingdoms. That creative was the worst. It was fun to look at as a comedy, but then once we put into user acquisition, it was just the worst. We switched it off quickly.
You were advertising it for yourselves, basically.
Pretty much, yeah. We just made ads that we thought were fun. None of the other people outside the office liked them. But then one of the latest, some kind of bad examples was with Fastlane, actually. When it first came out, we were not sure what we want to communicate, or what we wanted to tell our end users. And one of the features of Fastlane, that it has characters, and it has these bosses and gang bosses and things like that. And one of the characters is a girl, pretty girl, and with a microphone and things like that. So one of the first creators, what we did, we put the girl with a microphone. The game is arcade racer shooter. So, and then the click-through rate is down, impressions are down, and everything. Why nobody's clicking on it? Because there is a girl with a microphone, not racing or shooting or anything. So we've gone back to pure gameplay.
So I also have horror stories about live action. Don't be careful with live action. Build live action trailers at your own risk. Another recent example is had a partner use celebrities in their creative that they didn't pay those celebrities for. So that was taken down by Facebook policy. I would just give a shout out to our Facebook policy and guidelines that if you guys are building creative, make sure you don't get shut down. Happy to send that to anybody who needs it. From a great perspective, I think something I'm proudest of, and this goes back to my console days and working with EA back in California on Madden. And even though this is console related, I think it's still applicable to mobile gaming. And we haven't quite, there's not an exact analog, but I'm really interested in figuring this out, how to do this for mobile gaming. And it's this idea of personalized marketing at scale. So Madden is an American football game. It's one of the biggest selling games in the US. And there's 32 football teams. And so instead of creating one trailer and showing it to all the Madden fans, all the gamers in the US, EA created 32 individual trailers. And they didn't just target by geography, because you might live in San Francisco but being an LA Rams fan. What they did is they looked at in-game data of which team are you most likely to play as. And so if I play as the Chicago Bears, most often they'll serve me a Chicago Bears ad no matter where I am in the world. So if you guys have those types of games where there's factions or teams or different characters, and you have telemetry data on who people play as most often, if you can create a personalized dynamic creative that ties into that person's passion or that person's team, I think that's really the power of where Facebook is going, where it is today, and hopefully we can enable that to be even easier in the future.
Horror stories. We had a live action, actually the same. We just had a slot machine and then a lady in front of it with a double thumbs up, and we thought, okay, this looks funny, this will work, and it did not work. We also had a 3-reel slot machine with King, and we were pulled up for advertising the Ku Klux Klan. Unfortunately, so it was just a complete misunderstanding. We just pushed it to market, and this is what it was. So this was really terrible stuff. The positives, the creative loop feedback that I talked about in terms of designing a process, not just on your own ads, but we also did competitive research on what our competitors are doing and what ads seem to be successful, and then trying to innovate on those concepts is also pretty important. I guess the final negative experience we had was we had images that we drew ourselves that weren't actually in the game. So, we drew a puppy slot machine, for example, and when they got into the game, there was no puppies, and this was a mismatch between what we're advertising and actually what we're delivering. So this was obviously a mistake as well.
Now moving forward, developers are going global in some of the verticals. Any recommendations for going global, go-to-market approaches in terms of, maybe we can ask it in a vertical standpoint. There's casino standpoint, there's casual and more strategy art point.
For us, going global with creatives, it's always thinking global, but going local. Mm-hmm. It's very important that creatives are not only localized in language, if you have captions or call to action or anything like that, that also the creative style is localized to the cultural differences. For example, our games are very popular in Japan, Korea, Taiwan, also mainland China. Whenever we go to those particular markets, we need to also change the creative, different colors, fonts, also make it a little bit more localized, I would say. Similarly, if we advertise somewhere in South America, let's say, and these sort of things. Yeah, it's not just localizing the text, but localizing the art style also.
The same approach as it was EA, where we chose the most successful titles inside of the games. Actually, not, you know, like we showed, let's say Kangaroos was working for Australia, then of course we'd show Kangaroos, and you know, in Australia they call them pokies, not slot machines, so we had to localize specifically for Australia. But then also in parts of America, you know, if Buffaloes does well somewhere and Dragons does well somewhere else, then we would use our in-game data to make creative specifically for that region.
Yeah, it really takes time to learn about each country and the nuances. Even in Southeast Asia, the market I cover, every country is so different, so diverse from each other. I'll give an example. Recently, I was working with an Indian-based gaming company, and they have a cooking-related game. And they're having success in Japan, so they hired a translation agency, basically, to take their creative and translate it to Japanese. And we showed the creative to our Japanese counterpart, who's from Japan, works with Japanese advertisers, and he had some really great feedback for them that, you know, in the original creative that was translated through this agency, they had full sentences translated, and it just didn't make sense. The translations were literal, but in the Japanese context, it didn't make sense. He said you should have like one word translated to Japanese. And then secondly, the types of food they were showing in the creative, even the colors, didn't really align with the Japanese aesthetic. So he pulled up a few like popular Japanese Instagram accounts, like Taste Made, where people are cooking very quickly, and it's like a time-lapse video, and just some of the colors and images. And it really proved to me that, you know, hiring an agency to do the translation work, it works sometimes, but some countries are so unique in what they like, what sort of images, what, you know, their cultural resonance is in certain areas. So it's important when you're seeing success in an area, or you come up to a roadblock, to maybe dig a little deeper and get an expert, someone from that country, to give you feedback.
From the casual game point of view, I think actually, like for Rovio, we don't really localize so much on the App Store front. Well, it's kind of like the thing in the company that we don't do, but we do a lot on the creative front. So it's one of the two examples that I have was there's one video that we do in the 4th of July, that we put a giant American flag in the beginning of the video. And it was come up with a random idea, like, hey, let's try how it works. And it's actually the best performing video. And it's not only running for 1 or 2 days, actually running for 2 months, even though the American Independent Day is already passed.
Every day is the 4th of July.
Yes, and we did the same in UK. Sorry, Saikala. So we did the same in UK, and it apparently is actually working better. So actually, there's tiny changes on the creative. We're using exactly the same video. We're just adding like another layer in the first 2 seconds. And it's actually performing much better. That's the experience that I have from the West. From the East, we recently starting the Angry Birds 2 campaign in China. To be honest, like I don't have any expertise. It's running UA in China, and I know that it's a black box for me. So I've been coming around and talk a lot with the different like networks and video networks like AdColony and Vango. And one of the very great advice from Vango was just because they have a lot of nice clients in there, and they actually very nice to helping us to make some sort of localized creative because they have some experience on that. And it was like the best, like not only in terms of the volume, but also in terms of quality that we have with them. So we advise with your platform partners, or they are really good with those kind of things.
Good. I think we have time for one last question for all panelists. I'm not going to pretend you're going to know what's going to happen in the next 5 years. So I'm going to ask, what do you think is going to happen in creative in the next 2 years or so? Anyone?
I just think from video to interactive, playable type of ads is where we're probably heading. So for slot machines, it kind of plays naturally that I watch somebody win, or I watch the game. It'll probably start to be more interactive. This would be my guess.
Do you think VR, AR will play into it?
For casino, probably social casino or social slots, probably not in the next 2 years. But yeah, I think improvements in production quality is just going to keep getting better and better and better, and I think they're going to become more interactive and immersive ad units.
So I'll take a little different angle on this question because I primarily work in emerging markets, places where there's lower bandwidth, data is more expensive. And so the thing I'm really thinking about is what types of ad types are going to work well in India, in Vietnam? How do we scale video? Is video the answer there, or is there a lighter weight ad type that can work? Something maybe in between image and video. That's one thing. And then I think in general, Facebook obviously longer term is becoming a more and more immersive platform. And things like 360 video, AR, VR, they're something we're heavily invested in and pushing, but it's gonna take a while before that's something that's going to be in your marketing toolbox. So I'm thinking more sort of what are the new platforms, what are the new ad types that are really going to be successful in emerging markets?
Playables are very tedious to work with and to build, and it's a real pain, and it takes time and approvals and so on. So I disagree with you. I think 2 years is not enough for playables to get that scale and success. This is my opinion only. I think video is going to go even further in emerging markets, as you mentioned. But more than that, I think videos are going to become cheaper in production because even nowadays there are tools, there are cheaper licenses. You can build videos out of still images using Flickfill or something. The license per year is $200, which is nothing. And it would be more accessible because nowadays so many developers use video. It would be more accessible, it would be cheaper to make. And on the back of that, there will be more formats of video. So it would be, like you said, 360 and so on, but away just from Facebook, there will be a lot more formats. There'll be squares, rectangular, vertical, horizontal, and so many other things. So I think video will stick around for a while. The difference is it will be more of different kinds of video, and second, it will be much cheaper to make it.
I think I have to agree with Saikala about the playable. So I've been talking with one of our account managers, and I would say that the playable has been a buzzword that everybody was talking about. Playable as standalone ad format is quite expensive, and it's very hard to scale. We have been trying with a lot of partners, but we have been seeing a tremendous success when you're combining the playable as an anchor after the video. So I know that some of the video ad networks, I know that Vango is doing it, and we're seeing like a lot of the scale on there, which I see that why it's working, because it's, the video is something that people enjoy. It's giving the idea of how the game is. And then if you like the video, you want to interact after. But instead of having a giant like playable ad that you cannot click away, and then you just have to interact, and if you like, it's somebody who doesn't know what Game of War ad is doing, is going to have some trouble is actually knowing what's going on. So I would say that's like more like a hybrid model of different kind of like combining different ads into a single ad format, and that could be the trend.
Right. I think that's the last question for this panel. Now we're going to go into Q&A.
So you guys mentioned earlier about video. Obviously, that's a major advertising channel. Is there a way you guys try to keep production costs down on video?
So when you mean production costs down for video, I know that you probably talk a lot about this, but the video that made by the single guy, dirty work, that you just kind of filming what you've been playing, that's something that is being seen a trend now. I think that the cost on investing a very expensive video, which haven't been proven, unless you're doing a brand campaign, which I agree that you should invest on it, or a TV campaign, but otherwise, a performance-based, I wouldn't think that the production cost should be something that you really focus on making like $50,000 for one video, because it's probably not worth it.
Any other questions?
I'll actually add to that. To the cost, to keep, how we did it to keep the production cost down is we kind of take technical approach. We make the one long video that includes lots of components. So we can then take that one video after the style guide and creative direction. Then we make one video that is, let's say, 50 seconds long or 45 seconds long, has different components of it. From there, you can recycle that creative and cut it into different parts. You can make many different styles of creatives out of that one long one. So that one creative is actually going to last you longer, and that's a lot cheaper for us to do. Then what we also do, we start with the portrait orientation first, because it is, for artists, it is much easier to build the portrait orientation first, so then from that they can make it in square orientation or in landscape. So we start with portrait first, and then out of that make other formats as well. But usually one long in portrait and then cut it into pieces.
You were all talking about ROI on the ad level, and I mean, what I find a lot of times is that until, it takes some time to see let's say the LTV of a specific ad or something, and until we get the data, then it's already too late. I mean, Facebook's already, finished with it and starting to take the traffic to different ad because, that you need to constantly refresh the art. So I was wondering how you tackle that issue.
I could give our experience. What we do, we take two approaches. After 7 days, we have data scientists and analytics team. They build a model, LTV model, that calculates estimated LTV of 6, 12, or 9 months after 7 days data collection. Then we also apply, if we're testing creatives, we also apply statistically significant sample size. There is a matrix, and I think the smallest size we have is 68 or 69 installs. So we can basically say after 70 installs or so, if that creative has sign of life.
Can I ask you a question on that? How would you do that process if you didn't have a data scientist and a big analytics team? I know small developers, and even some of the partners I work with, their measurement teams aren't nearly as sophisticated and robust as you guys.
Doesn't Facebook have a segmentation tool where you can split the audience into two things? So you can take the same audience, split it in half, and then serve one creative to the one and one to the other, and then you get immediate feedback just based on the performance of the two creative versus each other. You won't get downstream revenue lifetime value, but you could get something close.
We're actually using that split test feature a lot. I think Facebook building it because a lot of us complaining to Facebook that you're deciding the winner so quick. Yeah. So actually, when you make 5 different videos, you don't want to see just 1 or 2. It's actually winning and take all of the money. So it's actually we do that kind of test on Facebook before we actually apply to the real campaigns.
Yeah, and then down the line you can look at the LTV per those ad types or whatever you're testing. A/B testing is a great way to try new optimization, new targeting types, new creative types. So. Highly recommend it.
Any other questions? Yeah, another one. Awesome.
Oh,
yeah,
persistent.
So you were talking about the data science. So I don't have a big team, but I have one. So I was wondering, let's say you had one data scientist for your marketing operations. What would you assign to him? What would you do?
Sorry, you said, what was the question? If you had one? Oh, we actually have one data scientist.
Okay.
Our team, our analytics team includes 3 tech analysts, so they do analysis, 1 data scientist who builds LTV models for all of our games, and it doesn't just serve UA team. We have to share him with product. And we have 1 data engineer as well. So we have to stretch our resources quite thin also. We build models, we build different LTV models and try to make it work and see which one of them works better. We check versus actual, so as soon as the actual revenue comes in, we then see if it aligns. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, more or less.
I can actually add into it because for us we have the data team who actually building the base and data process, and then we're using a lot of companies using Tableau or Click or Looker. So you actually need to train the people who are using the dashboard because you cannot always talk to the data guy and say, I want to have this dashboard. This is how it looks on Excel. It's not the case because it's otherwise going to swarm him. So what it would be nice is educating the people, let's say the UA team. This is the thing that you can do. It's like a pivot table on Excel. We already do the dirty work, which is processing the data. This is a parameter that you want to, just building your own dashboard. And that would take a lot of a lot of time off from the data guy to do more meaningful thing.
And there is another thing. If you have a small team and you're stretched, and let's say it's a startup, you can use lots of free tools, use third-party tech. Even if you don't have third-party tech, you can use Facebook Analytics. It's somewhat basic, sorry, but it's good enough to start with. It's good enough, it's reliable. It's, you know, if you implement the app events and your app events are verified after server verification, it's good enough to start with, and you can already cluster and build something and do some sort of analysis to begin with. You don't have to have an army of analysts to do this work for you. Everyone starts somewhere. We started with just a few people, now it's a few more.
Yeah, I would do basic reporting, analytics, dashboards first, second, lifetime value models at the most granular level that your data scientist feels comfortable with, second, and then propensity to pay, propensity to churn scores in terms of predictive scores, third.
I have a question. So Sean mentioned very briefly, I believe, Facebook's going to be trying advertising in Messenger. Did I hear that correctly?
Yeah, we're in very early tests right now with specific verticals. I believe it's e-commerce and entertainment.
So do you guys see Messenger or texting type services or AI even in general being big channels or marketing tools in the future?
Yes, 100%. I think we're going to see how it develops over time and what sort of interactions people are okay with in their messaging platform. So, the fundamental, I guess, reasoning behind this is, or the guiding light with Messenger is we think email is broken, and you look at your inbox and there's just a lot of spam or a lot of unnecessary emails from companies. So imagine if you get a flight delay notification, instead of an email you get a message. I mean, I know that some airlines have text notifications now, but it's just another channel to improve the quality of conversations between brands and people. That being said, you don't want to interact with every brand. You don't want to have a conversation with every brand in your life. So we're figuring out what are the right ways to do this and make it feel natural. How is the platform going to evolve visually and with more immersive experiences? We're trying things now like games inside of Messenger. And down the line, there could be other services or functionality inside Messenger that down the line could potentially give more services for advertisers and marketers. But like I said, it's still very, very early days. I think the most interesting thing today for this group in this room is instant games. And if you're not familiar with instant games, I recommend checking it out and thinking about it. We'll see long term how that specific element of messaging evolves, and if we can help partners monetize those games, depending on what Apple and Google say about it. But yes, there's going to be opportunities for Messenger. Hopefully, a couple years from now, WhatsApp as well. But that's still a long ways off, and these platforms want to have a strong user base and have a great platform before we introduce ads into the ecosystem.
Awesome, and kind of along the same lines, and Mark mentioned, going from video to interactive. How are all of you kind of preparing for the next step beyond video? Are you looking into chatbots, or what's kind of the next step?
We are looking at the chatbots, but just looking for now.
We're looking at chatbots less as like an advertising and more of a engagement with our player. So, your bonus is ready, or they have customer support tickets. These are the kind of things we're looking for chatbots rather than a source of UA or re-engagement. Yeah.
I mean, speaking on the advertiser point of view, we want to show in the ads where the users spend most of the time. So all of the messengers or WhatsApp is where the users spend most of the time. So, I mean, at some point when it's opening, we're definitely going to be the first one to try it. It's just how effective, I don't know. It takes Facebook a lot of time to actually make the DR ads to work. So I wouldn't be surprised if the messenger would take a bit longer.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much. Let's give them all a round of applause.